Great about or great like they stayed last day at yeah. Oh, but that was yeah. We have to go there like dance because that big boy was up training that come through. But this was the entry of the about a grade.
That's going back. That's it. Yeah, that's awesome. You see that Melissa's here? That's excellent. Good morning, everyone.
It was by accident.
Once again, good morning. All right, great to see everybody. Great to be back. We're going to be in the book of Job today, so we continue in our study of the wisdom literature. We've been looking at Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and now Job. So you want to open your Bible to the book of Job, and that's where we're going to be digging in today and next week as well. So, how many of you have ever read Job? Oh, a bunch of us have. Well, then who wants to volunteer to teach this class? Y'all have dug into this book before, so. Let's give kind of an overview here. So Job's name is pronounced either Job or Yov. It's kind of hard to tell because nobody speaks ancient Hebrew anymore. It's all a modern pronunciation of an ancient language. So Yov, something like that. And so then that went into German as Job, like with a J, because like German, you know. And then it got into English as Job, which ends up just looking like Job. But it's not Job, it's Job. His name actually has a meaning, Job. It means persecuted or hated. It's kind of a strange thing to name a guy who's as good as Job, good of a man as Job. The main theme is the problem of human suffering. That's the main theme of the entire book, the problem of human suffering. Some scholars take it as an extended parable. In other words, they don't believe that Job was a real person. And some understand it as a real story that happened to a real person. I don't have a magic school bus or a time machine, so I can't go back there with you. I'll tell you how I read it personally. I think that it is a real story that happened to a real person, but I do believe that the story is shaped, you know what I mean? Like, because it's long sections of poetry and stuff like that. So it's sort of like people debate whether Homer was really writing about a real city called Troy and a real war that happened with the Trojans and then the Trojan horse thing. Y'all know what I mean? And the whole thing's one big long poem. I don't know if you've ever heard it read in or recited, I should say, in Attic Greek, but it's poetry. The whole story is a big poem. Well, it's poetry so that people can memorize it and then retell it. That's why it's poetry. And that's much of ancient oral tradition literature. So I take it to be literature, Job, but I also take it to be a real story that happened to a real guy. But even if you took it as a parable, do I think your salvation is staked upon it? No, I don't. Because Jesus told a lot of parables, like the rich man and Poe Lazarus. Y'all know that story. Was that a real rich man? Probably not. He was a made up guy who was made up of a bunch of rich people that Jesus had met. You know what I mean? Does that, or how about this, the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, and the father who had two sons? That father is probably not real, and the sons are not real. They represent. But it doesn't matter that it's not real. You can still learn a lot from it. That's the whole point of the parable. So whether you take this as an extended parable or you take it as a story that happened to a real guy, it doesn't, your salvation's not riding on it, and you still can learn a lot from the book. Everybody with me? Okay. There are three assumptions in this book. The first is that there is only one God who omnipotently governs all according to his will. So when Job suffers, who made him suffer? Okay, so this is why I'm asking, because some people say the devil because God allowed the devil to do it to him, right? But who does Job blame most of the book? So many of you have read it. He blames God most of the book. Why does he do that? Because he's assuming that there is only one God, so that means that the buck stops with God, not the devil. So God may have allowed the devil to do this and that and the other thing to him. So if you said the devil, you're not wrong. It is, God said to the devil, behold, he is in your hands. You can do to him what you're asking to do to him. But it is ultimately God who's in charge, right? So that's the assumption of the book. There is only one God who omnipotently governs all according to his will. The second assumption of the book is that God is good and loving. And that may be an astounding thing to assume when God allows the devil to do what he does to Job. How is this God good and loving? But Job's complaints are complaints that are predicated upon the idea that God is both good and also loving. So that's why Job is confused. Like, why are you doing this to me? Or why are you allowing this to happen to me? Okay. So the assumption there is that God is actually good and that God is loving. And then the third assumption in the book is that human suffering is a reality. So that may sound like a, well, duh kind of moment. Of course, human suffering is a reality. But there are ways that we in our society sort of try to downplay suffering and its reality. I'll get to that in a minute. But the assumption in the book is that human suffering is a reality and that it's bad. Like that when you suffer, that's bad. Okay? Questions, problems? Okay. Here are some other important themes in the book. If you were to really dig into it, the theme of disinterested obedience. So whether I like what God is doing to me, whether I like what God is asking of me, whether I like anything that's going on in my life right now, will I simply obey? That's a theme of the book. Okay. Another theme of the book is, of course, not just human suffering, but more specifically, the suffering of innocent people. So it is a theme in the book. How many of y'all have ever heard that? It's an old cliche phrase, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? That is a theme of the book. And some people might say, well, Pastor Will, nobody's really good. Okay, true. Fair enough. Everybody's a sinner. So you could just say, well, everybody deserves suffering. And that's one way to go, and it would not be untrue to say. However, you would not be dealing with the reality of human suffering. And once again, I told you that the third assumption is that human suffering is a reality and that it's bad. I should have added, and that it's bad. So yeah, everyone's a sinner, but you and I both know that some people are about the best sinner you've ever met. You know what I mean? Anybody got that person in your head? Like that person was about the best sinner I ever met. So sometimes I'll just say it this way. Well, for a man, he's about as good as they come. Sometimes that's the way I'll talk about somebody behind their back that I really like. I never say it to their face. I wonder why. But anyway, if you're one of those guys or gals that I respect like that, I might say that about you behind your back. Well, she's about the, for a woman, she's about the best that they're, you know what I mean? Like, because you're just a person. You're just a person, but about the best sinner I ever met, right? Another theme is social oppression. His friends tell him that he's wrong the whole time. And they try to peer pressure him into admitting that somehow he had sinned, which he hadn't. Religious experience and pious duty. So, what do I mean by that? If someone's truly religious or truly a faith-filled person, they will believe no matter what they see with their eyeballs. Some people call it blind faith. It's not blind faith because there's actually evidence, but the eyes that you have in your head are different than the eyes other people have. So you see bad things happening, you see God allowing bad things in the world, and you still believe, and you still do your religious duty. Another theme is man's relationship to God and the nature of that God. Again, is he really good? Is he really all powerful? Is he really both at the same time? So there's a Jewish scholar who wrote like a tour de force on the book of Job, and his conclusion was that Job presents a God who is all loving, but he is not all powerful. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of that kind of debate before. Yes, no, no. Okay. Well, if you're new to the problems of theodicy, that's what it's called in a philosophy course. Some people say that when they look at how bad the world is and how much suffering there is and the problem of evil, they say, well, God is either good, or he's all powerful, but he can't be both. Because if he's all good and all powerful, why would he allow all this suffering and evil? Is there a hand up there? Yeah, fire away. Oh, okay. So that's a good question. So Isabella's asking the question, like, if you feel like your family is strict, um, what's the difference between the guilt you sometimes feel and actual sinning? So can anyone help Isabella out with that question? That's a very good question. Maybe we should open it up to the discussion of the class, of the group. Nobody's going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So go ahead, Izzy, you can clarify it. Mhm. Okay, so there's two questions in that. So for those of you who can't hear Isabella, I'll repeat it. She's saying she has family who are Catholic and they are strict, obedient Catholic, and they try really hard not to sin. Okay, fair enough, good. But she can tell that sometimes they can have a guilt there, even if they haven't done something wrong. So that's the first question. The second question, though, she said, and I have an aunt who's also Catholic, and she tries really hard not to sin, or she tried really hard not to sin, and yet bad things kept happening to her in her life. So I was kind of wondering, what did she do wrong? That is exactly the kind of question that Job is dealing with as a book. So that's a great question, Isabella. Let's help her with the first one, though. What's the difference between guilt and actual sinning? Yeah, right.
Well, it's just a feeling. And you don't think feelings lie to you, take a nap and eat a sandwich and see if you still feel the same.
Yeah.
Just our situation can adjust our feelings. Yeah, the sinning is actually doing something, following through on it.
Well, how would you know if you had sinned? What's your standard for that? There you go, the Ten Commandments. So Isabella, I think that the easiest way to look at it is if you can identify that you've broken one of God's laws in the Ten Commandments, we would call that a sin. If you cannot identify that, you may still feel a feeling of guilt because we feel feelings all the time. And I think Shane's got a good point. Some of our feelings are related to reality, and some of our feelings really are not. We just have them, but they're not necessarily related to the reality. They're just related to how we feel today. Yeah. Is that Bev back there? I can't really see. Yeah, hi.
It's the same thing. So once you realize that, then you should be always.
Okay, yeah. So that's a good reminder. I like our small catechism class that we just had today. This is great. But let's talk about the other question, the question of, well, my aunt tried, so Isabella's giving the example of her aunt, reminds her a little bit about Job, right? Again, is her aunt a sinner? Yes. But she tried really hard not to sin. So I'm sure she was a wonderful Catholic lady. She's the one that just passed away, is he? Yeah, a couple summers ago. So she's passed away now, but she did suffer a lot in life. And so Isabella's question about, well, what did she do wrong? That's what Job keeps asking. He's like, I didn't do anything wrong. So her aunt is a sinner, fine, but she's about the best sinner you've ever met. And here's the big one. If she's Catholic, is she baptized? Yes. So because of the blood of Christ, is she already justified through baptism? Yes. So now here's the real kicker then. If she's justified by faith, then she is innocent in that sense. So if you want to go with why do the innocent suffer and why do bad things happen to good people? She is innocent not on her own account, but on account of Christ, she is. So again, the question is, well, what did she do wrong? When we ask that question, we are arguing backwards from the effect to the cause. Isabel, I don't know if that hits you where you get your mail delivered or not, but if you ask it that way, my aunt suffered, so what did she do wrong? You're starting from the effect of the suffering and you're trying to work backwards to the cause, and that's what doesn't work. Human suffering is a reality of life. And that is, again, one of the assumptions. So again, it sounds like a duh moment, like duh, but Job doubles down on this as a book as a whole. Human suffering is part of life. It is a reality. And sometimes it's a mystery. Y'all remember when when Jesus' disciples asked him, who sinned, this man or his parents? And you remember when the guy born blind, and Jesus said, neither, like this guy didn't do anything to cause this, and his parents didn't do anything to cause this, but this is so that the glory of God will be shown in him, and I'm going to heal him right now. And then he did. Y'all remember that? So sometimes there's a mystery about suffering, like it's mysterious, suffering is. And when we try to answer the question, we're often going to come up with the wrong answer. This book deals with the nature of wisdom and the finality of death. And by the finality of death, I don't mean that the book of Job sees death as final. I mean, it deals with the question of, is death final? When I say the finality of death, is death final? And Job is a resounding no. Death is not final. In fact, Job 19 is a passage that's often read at Christian funerals. Oh, that my words were written, that they were inscribed in rock with a metal pen, like an iron pen. For I know that my Redeemer lives. Y'all know those words. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last I will see him, my eyes will, like after my flesh has been thus destroyed, he says, yet in my flesh I will see God. So he talks about the resurrection. So Job is a man who is justified by faith, just like you are. He had faith in God. And so in that sense, he's innocent. And yet he suffers. Before I move on to Satan, when I say that one of the three assumptions that human suffering is a reality and that it is bad, I told you that sometimes in our culture we downplay suffering. Can y'all think of some examples of ways that we downplay suffering in our culture? Yeah. Okay, those are maybe some great examples of sympathy and empathy, but I'm not sure that's exactly how we would downplay suffering. I just ran out of battery. I will now use my teacher voice. Good. What's an example of how we downplay suffering? It was bound to happen. Yeah, there you go. So see, somebody's suffering, or maybe you're suffering, and you just say, well, this is life. It was bound to happen. What did you just do? You downplayed it. What's another way? Okay. Like a silver lining or something? Yeah, so I think, Isabella, that's actually a great example of why we downplay it. We're trying to soften the blow for people. But what are some ways that we downplay it, Shane? Yeah, suck it up, put on your big boy pants, put on your big girl pants, right? Suck it up. It wasn't that bad. Look what happened to so and so. They had it worse. Okay. So here's where I get caught up, Shane, with the suck it up thing. I think that this youngest generation needs to be told to suck it up more often because they whine at the drop of a hat. But that being said, when we tell each other to suck it up all the time, and that's the only response we have to suffering, that can be unhealthy on the other end, right? So what Job essentially is a extended lament. How many of you have heard of the book of Lamentations? And what is a lament? It's a cry, yeah. And thank you very much. Some people can think it's whining or like a woe is me. It depends on how you mean woe is me. Woe is me. So what does woe mean? It's what the Jews mean when they say oy vey. Like it's actually a lament like someone died. So woe is me can be taken as a pity party, right? That's not what a lament is. A lament is not a pity party. Um, when someone dies that you loved and you grieve them, does anyone ever accuse you of a pity party? I hope not. If they do, you send me their address and I will set them straight. I will put the fear of God in that person if they call you having a pity party because you're grieving. So, but if you mean woe is me, like I might as well be dead. Does Job say that in the book? Yeah, he says, I might as well be dead. I curse the day I was born. I wish I had never been born. I'm as good as dead. Look at me. I'm a worm. God is firing arrows at me. He's made me his enemy for some reason. I don't understand. He wishes he were dead. That's not necessarily a pity party. He's grieving that his life is so hard. You ever grieve the fact that your life is so dang hard and you got to get up and get after it anyway? Some of you just took a big breath. I watched you. Yeah. That's what Job is doing. That's what a lament is. And here's one more aspect of a lament. If it's a true lament, there are laments in the Psalms. There's the whole book of Lamentations. Job is an extended lament. If it's a true lament, it's directed at someone. Who is it always directed at? Someone say it loud. Okay, that's why I'm asking. It's not directed at ourselves. Who's it directed towards? God. If it's a true lament, it's directed at God. Our culture as American Christians has very little room for lament, but lament is part of the Bible. Therapy is very, very good, but I would not suggest that you go to therapy unless you have first lamented to God and that you continue to lament to God and not just to your therapist. Or that you don't just go out with the girlfriends and lament over a Chardonnay, ladies. Because usually that's just called gossiping about whatever it is or whoever it is. But lament to God. Why is lament important for faith? We're telling God how we feel. Is our God a jealous God? Yeah, absolutely. He gets really mad if you try to pray to somebody other than him. Because A, nobody else is really a God, but B, what is one of the metaphors between Christ and the church? The church is the bride. That makes Christ the what? The bridegroom. He wants to be as intimate with us as your best friend, as your husband or wife. He wants to be that intimate with us, and he wants to know how you feel. He already knows how you feel. He wants you to say it. And if you've ever had a really close friend or a situation in your marriage which was safe enough for you to feel vulnerable enough to say it, not everybody's marriage is like that. But if you had a good enough marriage where you could say how you felt, that's what God wants you to do. Don't say it to someone else. Say it to me. Because if you say it to God, what essentially is that? Confession? What else is it? What's another word, churchy word? It's prayer. It's also an act of faith. You notice during the whole book, I saw a lot of hands. Many of you have read the book of Job. If you remember, in the book of Job, Job has these three friends. Eliphaz, Bildad, and some other dude. They're all weird names because they're not like our names, okay? So dude, and dude, all right? Larry and Daryl, yeah. Larry, Daryl, and the other brother Daryl, right? So Job has these three friends, Larry, Daryl, and Daryl, and they keep talking about God to Job. If y'all ever notice, they say, well, God is just, he would never do this if, or you must have sinned. So if you just they keep talking about God. Nobody's talking to God. The only one who's talking to God is Job. And at the beginning of the book, Job talks to his friends an awful lot. As the book goes on, you know what you notice if you're paying attention? Job talks to his friends less and less and less. He just doesn't even bother to answer them anymore. They keep talking about God. He just doesn't even answer them anymore. And instead, he increasingly just complains to God. Now, is everything does Job say everything right? Does he say everything without any doubt or without saying that God stinks? And you know what I mean? Like, does he ever say something that's wrong? Does he ever say something that's wrong? Yeah, absolutely does. But at the end of the book, God commends Job and he condemns his three buddies, Larry, Daryl, and Daryl. Why does God condemn Larry, Daryl, and Daryl? Because he says, you speak about me in a way that has no sense, but at least Job, when he knew to complain to me. That's still an act of faith. What worries me when I see that there's no room for lament in American Christianity is that it means that there's no room to encourage you to continue turning towards God rather than turning to other people or talking about God almost like you think you're talking behind his back. When we do that to people, we call it gossip. Can you talk behind God's back? No, because, he heard you. You know what I mean? But some people, you ever talk to somebody who talks about God like you're like, if Jesus were in the room right now, would you be saying that about him? You know what I mean? And some of you are afraid to lament because you're afraid to say something to God's face that you shouldn't say. But you know what lament does? Lament allows you to say some things that, yeah, you probably shouldn't have said, but it allows you to say it to his face instead of about him to other people. Is God a big enough God to put up with your temper tantrum? He is absolutely a big enough God to put up with your temper tantrum. But at least you said it to him. You didn't say it about him. You said it to him. Yeah, go ahead and get mad. Why'd you let this happen? What are you, sleeping up there? What are you doing? Because at least that's still addressing God, not talking about him, but talking to him. Which is why even with some lines in there where Job says some stuff that's wrong, there's some bad theology going on in there. God does not come to Job and say, I graded your paper, you get an F on theology. Instead, he comes to Job and he says, I commend you because at least you kept complaining to me. Your three friends, on the other hand, if you don't personally pray for them, Job, and if you don't personally offer a sacrifice for them, Job, I'm going to kill them. Because they like to go around talking about me instead of to me. Life is not a theology class. Or it's not the one you're thinking of. I'll put it that way. You're not talking about God, you're talking to him. Yes. Sure, you can compare it. I mean, you got to be careful when you compare anything, but because you want to make sure it's apples to apples. But yeah, there's a lot of suffering there. How about this though? I'll do you one better than the tornadoes. Many of you lived most of your life span in the 20th century. How'd the 20th century go? 6 million dead Jews, 120 million dead Russians. How many were killed in China when the communists took over? How many millions? Can't even remember. Persecution of Christians was worse in the 20th century than in all previous 19 centuries combined. Some of you remember your family members talking about the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. What did a bunch of pious farmers ever do to God? There's plenty of suffering in the world, isn't there? So the question I think that's behind there is Job suffered so much personally that it's kind of hard to wrap our heads around. Well, I've never suffered to that degree in my life. But if we've suffered, then it still counts towards what this book is talking about. It's the reality of human suffering. Yeah, so keep going. We don't want to be the friends that Job had. So we become that friend when we try to explain to someone about their suffering, or we try to minimize it, or we try to explain God in a way that would make them stop yelling at him. So let me tell you what some people say when they come to my office. They're upset, they're grieving something that's going on, they're suffering, and they come in, they sit in my office and they say, Pastor Will, I know I shouldn't be mad at God. And if you want to be a friend like Job's friends, you would say, oh, you're right. You shouldn't be mad at God because he's all good and all loving and he'll see you through this. They're usually shocked, these people are, when they sit in my office and they say, I know, Pastor Will, I shouldn't be mad at God. And I say, why shouldn't you? And then they're shocked. I said, does the buck stop with God? Yeah. Well, then yell at the only person in the room who's actually responsible. I'm not going to tell you not to be mad at God. I'm going to tell you, go ahead and get it out. Yell. Because he can take it. But make sure you continue to address him in the middle of your suffering. Don't be addressing somebody else, and don't be talking about God like he's theoretical. Talk to him. You want to yell? Yell. Go ahead, get it out. But don't just sit there and suffer in silence and say that you're being a good little pious Christian because you're not yelling at him and telling him what you really think. You're not being a good little pious Christian. That's actually the opposite of a faith response, because you're not talking to God as if he really is in charge. And as if you really are confused because you don't understand why he's allowing something, because you do know that he's good and you do know that he's loving. It would be one thing if God wasn't good and loving. Then you'd just say, well, I guess he's allowing me to suffer because he does that because he's a jerk. Do y'all remember the parable of the talents that Jesus told? Y'all remember that? One guy had 10 talents, one guy had 3 talents, and one guy had 1 talent. Y'all remember that? What the guy with the 1 talent who buried it in the ground, what did he say when the master showed back up? He said, I was afraid of you because why? No, you're a hard man. I know you're a hard man. And what did the master say? Oh, you know I'm a hard man, do you? Well, guess what? I'm about to show you how hard I really can be. To those people who believe that God is not good, he shows himself to be as terrible as you think he could be. It is a faith response to yell at God and say, why are you allowing this? Because I actually know you to be good. I actually know you to be loving. So what in the world are you doing? That's still a faith response, because you see what you believe, faith, belief, right? What do you believe in that scenario? You believe that he's good. That's why you're confused. You don't want to be like the guy in Jesus' parable who says, well, I knew you were a hard man anyway, so that's why I was afraid of you. So I didn't even talk to you or deal with you. Does that make any sense outside my own head? So Satan shows up in this book, and it's the first example of calling the devil Satan. The devil has lots of different names in the Bible, both Old and New Testament. Job is the first example of calling him the Satan. So I've given it to you there. I know you don't read Hebrew, but I just want you to know that I'm not making this stuff up. It's Hasatan there in Hebrew. Ha is the word the, so it's the Satan. So it's like Jesus the Christ. You know how Christ is not Jesus' last name? It's his title, right? So Jesus is his name. Christ is his title. It's the Satan. It's not Satan. It's not a name. It's a title. Like Christ is a title, Satan is a title. What does Satan mean? It means the accuser or the adversary. So Satan is pictured a little bit like the prosecution. He appears before God in the heavenly court and he accuses Job. What's he got to accuse Job of? Nothing. But he accuses. That's what he does. Okay, so that's his title, the accuser. Everybody clear on that? in my personal grammar, I don't call him Satan. I call him the Satan because it's like the Christ. Or if I call him Satan, I mean it like when I say, Christ. And I don't put a the in front of Christ because I know it's a title, not a name. So in Job chapters 1 and 2, if you look at Job chapters 1 and 2, what happens? There's this dude you're introduced to. His name is Job. He's obviously a good guy. Like he's a sinner, but he's justified by faith, and he lives that way. He lives by his faith, and he's about the best sinner you ever met. Okay? And then in verse 6 of chapter 1, what's it say in verse 6? I'm going to read it out loud. Now, there was a day when the sons of God, by the way, sons of God can be used for believers like you and me. Sons of God can also be used for angels. So this is angels. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also, that's the Satan, and the Satan also came among them. Anybody here surprised to see Satan in heaven? Shouldn't be, because he's still God's devil. We don't believe in a dualistic religion. There's not two gods, one who's good and one who's evil, and they're equal to each other. The Satan is just a creature like you and I. He was made by God, okay? So he still, even though he's in rebellion, has to show up and give an account to God on a regular basis. Can you imagine how miserable that is for him? It makes me smile every time I think of how miserable that is, right? You're in open rebellion and you still have to show up and give an account because God's not having it. I'm still God and you're not. I absolutely love it. And the Satan also came among them. The Lord said to the Satan, "From where have you come?" The Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to the Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" So did God just admit that Job is blameless? Absolutely. He admitted it out loud, and that he really digs him. He's like, check out Job. He's awesome. That's the Will Miller uninspired translation, by the way. Then the Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And that's chilling. Behold, it's all in your hand. That's chilling that God would allow that. A lot of people read this section, I think, incorrectly. They make this like a 90s rom-com where it's like a bet about the ugly girl. I bet you won't ask out the ugly girl to prom. And then they do like the makeover montage, and it turns out she was hot the whole time. Have y'all seen that kind of film before? Just stupid. But anyway, it was a thing in the 90s. They made a bunch of them. And then the bet is about her, right? She becomes the bet. And people misread this section a lot because they think Job is the bet. They think it's like a bet between God and the devil, and Job's caught in the middle, and Job is the bet. Job is not the bet. What did the Satan say? He says, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not done great things for him? But behold, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." What is the Satan actually saying to God? He is saying that, yes, literally. I'm asking you to kind of read between like, what's the force of what he's saying? Yeah. It's not real love. It's just gratitude for all it gave him. And what is he implying about God? You have to buy it because nobody would ever do what? No one would ever love you for you. Now, who in the world would actually say that? The Satan would. Why? Because he wants to be God and he rebelled. He thinks no one else would ever love God for God. because he can't love God for God. So no one else must be able to either. So Job's not the bet. God's the bet. I love you. Jesus loves you. I'll let you reflect on that for a week. We'll start again here next week.